Welcome to the VA BLUF. I am your host, former United States Marine Corps Staff Sergeant and disabled veteran, Jesus Flores. BLUF is an old military acronym for bottom line up front. The idea behind the VA BLUF is a simple one. We know you're busy, so we're cutting through all the noise and putting the important details about your healthcare first. The VA BLUF was created to bring you, our listener, into the senior leader and subject matter expert fold at the largest VA healthcare system in the nation. The VA BLUF gives you access to the people providing your healthcare and that of over 184,000 veterans living in North Texas. So here's the bottom line. Everyone listening to this podcast is either a veteran or knows a veteran. We know that veterans experience unique hardships that are exclusive to the veteran community. However, many don't know that VA employs people who are able and will help you. It's why we're here. It's in our mission to care for those who shall have borne the battle and for their families and survivors. On today's episode, we're talking mental health with Dr. Colleen Richardson. She's a wife, a mom, a basketball coach, a Navy combat veteran, and the current chief of psychology at VA North Texas. Welcome, Dr. Richardson.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Good morning. Here's the round of applause for you. So, Dr. Richardson, since reaching out to you last week about coming on the podcast, I got to do some research about you, and there's no way I'd be doing you justice by reading your bio. So I want you to tell our viewers and our listeners about yourself because, in my opinion, you're a superwoman. I mean, that was the consensus across the board. You're a superwoman. So thank you so much for coming on.
Well, thank you. I don't think I've ever heard that acronym used associated with myself, but I'm humbled and I appreciate that. So thank you. Wow. So
Dr. Richardson, when did you or how did you decide that you wanted to be a psychologist?
Gosh, when I was in graduate school, I originally thought I wanted to be a physician and do pediatric surgery or orthopedic surgery, and just felt this calling in a direction to help others. And when I was in grad school, one of my professors was a former Navy SWO, and kind of given a little bit of my background, I was a college basketball player. And as my mother would say, you need somewhere where you fit in the most. And he said, you really need to join the military. And I said, oh, yeah, okay, that sounds like a great idea. And so I gave it some consideration over the 5 years I was in grad school. And towards the end, it did seem like a great fit for me. The athletic background, a little bit of a potty mouth, kind of my dominating personality style from time to time. And I had spent a lot of time around MacDill Air Force Base at the time. And so I got to know some of the Marines and soldiers and sailors over there. And just seemed like a great fit. So after I finished graduate school, I joined the United States Navy, did my residency in the Navy, and then continued on from there.
And then you get attached to the Marines in Fallujah. That I found I got buddies who, still don't talk about Fallujah. Who thought it was a good idea to send a psychologist with the Marines to Fallujah?
So the psychologists have been embedded with the Marines for several years before I even got there. So they call them Oscars.
Do you know when that started? I don't remember having a Navy psychologist. Yeah, I believe it
started in 2004 with Gary Hoyt, Commander Hoyt. So the idea was to take a psychologist and embed them with Marine Corps infantry units to provide frontline mental health support. And up until that time, only men had really filled the billet for obvious reasons. They're all male units that you're rolling out with. But as the years then the war went on, there weren't enough psychologists to fill all of these particular billets. And so I was sitting in my office one night late at Camp Pendleton, a couple months after finishing residency, and I get this phone call in my office from the MEF psychiatrist who happened to be attending when I was a resident. And he said, hey, do you still want to be a badass G.I. Jane? I'm like, of course I do. Yes, sign me up. He goes, oh, great, you leave Friday. I'm like, I leave Friday for what? He goes, we're gonna pull you out to Iraq with us. I was like, sir, I just got here. I'm going to need some time to go to SIF and get my gear and all that stuff. And so long story short, they attached me to a med battalion, rolled me out to Fallujah in 2008. And then when I got to Fallujah, I was picked up by 1st Marine Division and then embedded with the units of 1st Marine Division for the rest of the deployment.
What was the hardest part about seeing those guys come back from outside the wire and come and talk to you?
So I rolled out with them outside the wire. So I did a little over 100 combat patrols with them myself. So literally embedded with them on foot patrols, on convoys. It was really, I think the hardest part to start with was being a female, being an officer and getting them to be like, oh, not roll their eyes at me the entire time I was with them to start with.
Man.
I mean, you know how it is. I mean, you're either a good officer or you're a bad officer.
Did they ever give you any nicknames?
Wizard. I got Wizard, the Wizard, because we make people disappear.
We go to the Wizard. Yes, that's right.
But being the first female, after a couple months, they re-nicknamed me and gave me the name the Sorceress.
The Sorceress. That's interesting.
It is. Yeah, they figured they wanted to give the first female, I guess, something different than what the men have like received in the past.
Gotcha.
So, yeah.
So all that goes down. You come back. Now you are working at VA. Can you talk about your transition just a little bit back into the civilian world?
Sure. So when I got back from Iraq, I took over Wounded Warrior Battalion at Camp Pendleton, and that was a really tough 18 months, give or take. We had several suicides at the battalion. And then when I finished that, I left active duty and joined the Fresno VA in California, in Central California. And the transition for me was tough. It was really, really difficult to transition because you're so used to this hierarchy and you're so used to being in charge and having men, if you will. I didn't serve with a whole lot of women, but I had a lot of corpsmen that were men, and you had this camaraderie that's difficult to explain, but I didn't have to explain it to them. They just understood. And so to transition from that into the civilian sector with, civilian professionals that are all psychologists, all psychiatrists, all social workers, extremely professional, and knowing that I had that side to me that's more kind of laid back, and I wouldn't say it's not professional, but it's a little bit more chill, if you will. And it was tough to kind of fit in with my peers and realize where I stood and all that, because, I mean, you know how we talk in the military. It's like you said, it's bottom line up front, and that's exactly how I operate. And that didn't always go over well with my colleagues. And so luckily for me, I had a really good mentor who pointed that out to me and wasn't afraid to sit down with me and give me the bottom line up front about my inability to be professional to start with. And so he really kind of shaped and molded me over the last several years to be where I'm at today. So I have to give him a lot of credit.
And then you go and you marry a jarhead.
Oh, yeah, I can't get away from him.
Oh, man. Why did you choose VA?
I love what I do. I honest to God, I can't picture myself doing anything else. I love my Marines. I love my sailors. I mean, that's all I've ever done. My entire career as a psychologist has been with the military, serving with the military or taking care of the veterans. I feel like I fit in with them. They fit in with me. They accept me exactly who I am. I don't have to pretend to be something else. I can just be me, and they can just be them. And I feel like that's just something a lot of us don't accept readily or upfront with people anymore. Is that aspect of who we are? They're men and women who have sacrificed so much, and I just feel like we need to take good care of them, and I want to do everything I can to do that for them.
And so right now in your current role, you're the chief of psychology for the largest VA mental health care program in the U.S. So what is that? What is the chief of psychology? What do you do?
Yeah, so the chief of psychology has changed in the last just 4 months, actually. Up until about 4 months ago, I oversaw all the CBOCs, so our community-based outpatient clinics. I had about 16 or 17 team leaders that fell under me directly. And then I oversee the psychology training programs. I oversee workplace violence for the facility, including employee threats, patient threats, prevention and management of disruptive behavior, and then the oversight of all the clinical psychologists. So there's about 90 of us here at the VA North Texas. So the clinical and administrative oversight of a lot of those programs.
When you train, or you're training the folks that work for you, can you talk about some of those programs real quick?
Sure. You mean the programs in terms of...
Yeah, just how you train them to interact with the veteran, or how you change their mind about veterans.
So I think the biggest thing, so I teach a class, I've been teaching this class for about 5 years now. It's called Military Culture and Competence. And so it is like as real as it gets. I don't beat around the bush with military culture and competence. How there's a funny side to what we do, and then there's a serious side to what we do. They get all of that. And I kind of tell them, who you get in this presentation, if it offends you, I'm sorry, but this is exactly how we function in the military. There is no... it's like the name of your podcast. It really is the bottom line up front with everything, and that's what they get. And so I think, I try to teach all the medical students. I try to teach the residents. I try to get that with the psychology interns, and if I can get it with the postdocs. But I think for me, my biggest thing is take 30 seconds of your first appointment, 30 seconds. One, be respectful, and two, ask them how they're doing and get to know them. I think that's all veterans really want is 30 seconds of our time. You know, if they're into a primary care appointment, to just say, for the doc to say, hey, I'm Dr. So-and-so, and what brings you in today?
That's something that I still, complain, for lack of better words, about. I used to, when I would go see my doctor, he wouldn't look up from his computer. Ultimately, I had to get my doctor changed. So I was like, there's no, I can't relate to him. There's no connection to him. I come in, he's like, hello, Mr. Flores. He won't look up.
Yeah.
Just typing away. And so I changed over to the Bravo Clinic. So.
Yeah, and I think people don't realize in the military, right? This is what I tell the medical students. I said, hey, have you ever, what's the difference between Parkland and what's the difference between the VA? And they're like, what do you mean? I said, when you walk down the hallway in Parkland, what happens? They're like, well, nothing. Nobody ever says anything. I said, have you ever walked down the hallways in the VA? They're like, yeah, you can't walk by anybody without being greeted. I'm like, exactly, because that's military culture. You greet everybody who comes by. Good morning, sir. Good morning, ma'am. How are you doing? Like, you're not walking by a veteran with, and if you ignore them, they're like, excuse me, good morning. Like, you better look up from your phone. You better pay attention because they're going to call you out on that. And so that's one of the things, I hope that they get from me teaching them is, if you know one little thing, right? Marines, don't call them soldiers. Don't call them Joes. They're troops or they're Marines, right? And I said, if you could just say, good morning, Marine. Hey, I saw you're in the Marine Corps Semper Fi. I said, there you go. Boom. You've got it.
Our head gets huge.
That's a whole other story. I mean, it speaks volumes to you, though, does it not? If I walked in the room and said, hey, good morning, Marine, you're like, whoa, hey, you look through my chart.
You speak my language,
exactly.
Yes. It's our love language, I think.
Oh, my gosh. There's so many for Marines, right? You say food, coffee, Marine. I mean,
oh, I know.
Hit one of the keywords and you've got them.
And then we smile like we're going crazy. Dr. Richardson, there's an increasing number of women serving these days in the military. That's making our women veteran numbers go up also. Are there more women seeking help now due to combat operations?
I'm not sure the exact numbers right off the top of my head, but I think we're seeing an influx of female veterans coming in our doors for sure. And gosh, I only hope those numbers continue to go up as we specialize more in women's care and have women's clinics and specific programming specifically for women only. I really hope that those numbers continue to go up.
Are you seeing more women veterans who are seeking help for military sexual trauma-related issues?
We do. We see quite a few women and men as well for military sexual trauma, but we have specific clinics, and we have actually military sexual trauma coordinators within mental health who actually coordinate their specific care. So anybody who has suffered from or experienced military sexual trauma can contact one of our 3 coordinators in Bonham, Fort Worth, or Dallas for that specific type of care.
Can you go into those programs a little bit that are available at VA North Texas for or that can help with PTSD and issues relating to PTSD?
Yeah, of course. So we have, within mental health, we have what we call PCTs or trauma-specific clinics. So in Dallas, we have a trauma PTSD clinic that specializes in combat trauma, military sexual trauma, any type of traumatic event that has occurred, you can receive specific PTSD counseling for. And then in Bonham, we have the same thing. And then in Fort Worth, we have enough providers who specialize in those areas to treat any of our military veterans who've experienced those types of issues.
It's something that I found out, or at least reaching out to the mental health teams. I had never done it before. Up until last August, I finally decided, hey, maybe I do. I had to look the man in the mirror and say, hey, you need help, because I was falling apart. They also help with trauma that wasn't military related, right? Can you tell me about that?
Sure. So we know that PTSD, one of the things that can have an effect on people or cause them to have symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder is some type of experience and or hearing about a traumatic event. So it could be a natural disaster like a hurricane or a tornado. It could be a motor vehicle accident while you're in the service. It could be military sexual trauma. It could be combat. It can stem from several different things for sure.
Why do you think there's such a stigma around, wanting to get help?
Because I think it started when we all joined the military, right? I mean, the biggest perception in the military is not to be perceived as weak. And nobody wants to be perceived as weak. And unfortunately we give people nicknames if they go to sick call, right? Sick call commandos. And, the corpsman is supposed to give you vitamin B, which is, Motrin or whatever. But I think, it started many, many years ago before any of us ever joined the military, that there's a stigma associated with seeking mental health care. And if you seek mental health care, that you're considered weak. And I think that is the absolute wrong way to go with things. I think we've learned in the last probably 20 years since the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan have really amped up that it starts with your senior leaders, right? If they're good to go with you seeking care and encouraging you to seek care, the faster you seek care, the sooner you get help, the easier it is to help folks. But now we're looking at 15, 20 years worth of, if you will, kind of bad behaviors, so to speak, of trying to cope with the trauma or trying to cope with the things that they've experienced, and they haven't always done it. They've done what's worked for them, right? Avoidance, not wanting to talk about things that they've seen or done, not wanting to go places if it kind of triggers their anxiety or triggers the traumatic event. And while that works in the short term, in the long term, it's going to catch up, right? We can't outrun what we've experienced. And so I think that perception of being perceived as weak has really hurt us. But I think people are starting to realize now, at least I hope so, that it's actually a strength to ask for help. And it's a strength to encourage your fellow Marines, soldiers, sailors, troops, whomever, to get help as well. Because, what's the big deal?
Yeah, some of the guys that I trained who went on to become Marines or sergeants and staff sergeants here recently, as they're getting out, I've encouraged them to seek, mental health care, because it took me, we got back from Iraq in 2010. It took me almost 10 years to finally, hey, maybe it's not as, as bad as I was making it. Maybe it's not, maybe I do need it. And so when they reach out to me, I'm like, yes, first thing you need to do is get enrolled in VA, go talk to the psychologist, go talk to the psychiatrist, let them know, hey, look, this is what I saw, this is what I did. Don't let it weigh you down, right? Now, you do a lot of work in destigmatizing that. And you do, I think in your bio, I read that you do contract work with the DOD. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. So for the last, I think it's been 10 years now, I've been working with a company who contracts with the DOD, and I've gone to Okinawa, Japan, and worked with the 3rd MAW out there. I've gone to 29 Palms. I've gone to Camp Lejeune and worked with 8th Marines out that way. What we've really tried to do is figure out why there's a stigma that surrounds mental health. Is it lack of education? Is it lack of, what are my resources? How does this impact my career? So we've been trying to focus on destigmatizing it from an educational standpoint. So really telling our Marines, hey, listen, if you seek mental health help, it doesn't mean you're going to lose your top secret security clearance. It doesn't mean that you're weak. It doesn't mean that your career is over and you can't be a Marine anymore. That's the furthest thing from the truth. And then the other piece we've done is kind of say, here's the difference between a psychologist and here's the difference between a psychiatrist, or here's the difference between a psychologist and a social worker, and try to explain to them what the differences are and then what kind of services we offer and what we can do to help them. Because I think one of the biggest things I've heard a lot of even just buddies of mine say, they're, I've been friends with them for 15 years. And I'm like, well, how's talking to you any different than talking with my buddy? We talk about the same stuff all the time. I'm like, does your buddy know what to do with the information once you share it with him? Or does he go, yeah, man, that stinks? Yeah, that's what he says. Well, isn't that what you're going to say? No, that is not what I'm going to say. We're going to take that information and I'm going to help you make sense of it. And then we're also going to do some really specific, what we refer to as evidence-based therapy. So things that, there's evidence to support that it will reduce your PTSD symptoms or reduce your depression. So we try to get that information out there because I think we need to destigmatize it because there's a stigma associated with, like I said, what was my nickname in Iraq? The Wizard.
The Wizard.
Because people thought, well, as soon as you send everybody to see her, she's going to make you disappear. Yeah, that's what no, my job is not to make you disappear. My job is to make you better and get your butt back out to the front lines.
Yeah, that was one of my biggest fears, especially while I was in, all the old staff sergeants, gunnies, sergeant majors, that you don't go to the head shrinker because you don't come back.
Yeah.
I remember sitting, I was telling Mike Buchanan, who is the host of Charlie Mike, by the way. I was telling him, I had an incident with a first sergeant back when I first got back from my first deployment in Africa, where I may or may not have had a little bit too much to drink, and he swore that I said I was suicidal. I was like, I don't remember talking about that. I don't think I did. But he sat me in his office and he said, did you say this? Because if you did, I got to send you away. I was like, well, I don't remember saying it. And after that, I think that kind of sealed the deal for me. I was like, I'm never going to look for it. And so it took me 10 years after I got out to really seek help.
Yeah, and I think that's the other piece too. That's huge, right? I mean, a lot of people have thoughts about suicide. Now, whether or not they're going to act on it or actually do it is a whole different story. But I think, if you took 10 of your buddies who you deployed with and sat them all down, probably 8 out of 10 of them are going to say, yeah, I've thought about it. It's crossed my mind, but I'm not going to do it. But it crosses people's minds, and that's frightening in and of itself, but it doesn't mean that they're going to. And I think that's where that stigma comes in of, well, if I even say it, that's it, I'm done, my career's over. No, that's not it at all.
I have sat with my buddies and we do talk about it. I think I think it might be a little weird to say, no, I've never thought it, or it's never crossed my mind. And, when I'm with my buddies and we talk about it, it's just like we're talking about anything else. Is that kind of what you hope comes out of this?
Absolutely. I really hope that when you feel normal when you're finished having those conversations, like, oh, thank goodness, like, I'm not the only one who feels like this. Because I think there's a normalcy that comes with realizing that you're not in a boat all alone, but you're with those, for lack of a better term, battle buddies all over again, and they're experiencing the same things that you are, and you start to realize, okay, well, maybe this is normal to a very abnormal thing that I've gone through.
Gotcha, yeah. So some of the lessons learned that along the way, can you tell me about the ones you are currently applying at VA North Texas to help with destigmatizing mental health care?
Well, I think there's a couple things. So I think, first comes community partners, because we know that a lot of our veterans who are committing suicide are some of the ones that have never sought treatment at all, right?
I found that kind of weird. They never looked for it. They never came in.
I still think there's a stigma associated with VA care, right? And for, I'm not trying to be offensive, but it's for older people. It's not for our young veterans. No, it absolutely is. The VA is changing. We've made great changes. We're continuing to make good changes. We still have a long road ahead of us to be better at certain things, but I think we're striving in that direction. But I will say, hands down, there is no doubt in my mind, nobody does mental health care better than VA, because we train them, and then I turn around and hire as many of them as I can that we train. So I don't think you'll get better care than the VA for your mental health issues.
Are you seeing more veterans like yourself that are transitioning into mental health care?
Definitely.
And you train them and then they take care of the vets?
So we don't have as many veterans coming into mental health care. We have, in my time here, I've seen one veteran come through as a medical student. I'm getting ready to interview one that's a former veteran who's coming in as a psychologist, which I'm really excited about because there's very few of us, I think, that come into VA. I think a lot of them are still on active duty, per se, and hopefully eventually we'll get them. But I'm not seeing as many as I would like to see. But all that being said, I used to have my own thought that, gosh, how can you treat veterans if you're not a veteran or you don't understand veterans? And I think that was a huge faux pas that I had 10 or 15 years ago, where it was my own inability to see past that was impeding my ability to get veterans in the door itself, right? You don't have to be a veteran to treat veterans, right? I don't have a substance use disorder to treat veterans who have a drinking or drug problem. My kind of joke is, if you told me to give up chocolate for the rest of my life, there's no way. Like, it would never happen. So I can certainly appreciate and understand what it would be like to tell a 25-year-old young man or woman, this is it, this is your last drink, you're never going to have another one. So I don't want to discourage veterans because we don't have a lot of veteran psychologists per se to not come in. Our civilian population of providers, they're fantastic. Like, hands down, I feel like I have the best group of psychologists ever. Really.
That's exciting. And I've used you guys, so I can attest to it. But they are outstanding. Mm-hmm. And they have really helped me out. I actually credit them with saving my life, about a year ago.
That's awesome.
So I'm excited. I want to ask you about how this pandemic has changed your approach to mental health.
Yeah.
Tell me about the telemental health and, all the good stuff that comes with it, because I've been using it and it's exciting.
So it's funny you ask, because we just did a survey that we wrapped up yesterday asking veterans what they thought about what we call VA Video Connect, right? Seeing them from our homes into their homes or from our offices into their offices. And for me and for our veterans, nothing has changed, right? You get the same health care, you get the same mental health care. The delivery is the same. Technology stinks from time to time, so occasionally you'll have that hiccup in bandwidth, and then there's a glitch, and you miss something that somebody has said. But I think what I've heard from the veterans recently is, you know what I love? I don't have to drive an hour to the VA. I don't have to wait for parking. I don't have to do this. And I can still work and not miss as much work. Or, hey, you guys are offering evening hours. And so when I wrap up my workday, I can sit in my car, in my driveway. Obviously, we need to know where you're located in case something serious happens during the appointment. But so far, they've loved it. Now, there are a handful that are like, I still miss being seen in person. There's a little bit of a connection for me that I miss. No problem. We're doing that too right now. We're seeing veterans in person if they want to be seen in person. But we're trying to keep them safe, our providers safe. And so we're encouraging them, if they want to stay home, to stay home. But of the 70 or so that we got surveys back from, they have enjoyed it thoroughly. So I'm excited about it.
And it's available everywhere, huh?
Everywhere. I mean, you could be in, far left Texas now in Denton. I love my Denton folks. But if y'all are all the way out there, we're seeing them. I mean, it's cool, right? I mean, you don't ever have to miss an appointment. You can, some of our veterans are like, I just love that I have 30 seconds to get ready and I brush my teeth and there I am. I'm like, okay, that works.
Man, as we were getting ready to wrap up, one last question. Mm-hmm. You're a basketball player and you coach. How do you find time to do all that stuff with everything else you got going on?
I have no idea. I agreed to coach 2 more teams this year. I love it. It is my self-care, is to teach young women how to be strong young women and to realize that. So I tell my girls all the time, if we win, fantastic, it's an added bonus. But what I want you to learn from basketball is not to quit, because practice is going to get hard. I don't care if you have to crawl across the line when you're done running a suicide or a sprint, you will finish and you will put your head up and you will keep going. And that's what I want them to take away from it.
You sound like my drill instructor.
That's probably how they feel I am too.
Well, Dr. Richardson, thank you so much for coming on.
My pleasure.
Great information. I appreciate you and I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Let's do this again.
Absolutely.
Well, that's all the time we have this week. I want to thank Dr. Richardson for coming on, and thank you for tuning us in and leaving us on. We encourage you to tell your friends and family about the VA BLUF and follow the VA BLUF on social media by searching for the VA BLUF. On Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. You can catch this and all episodes of the VA BLUF on buzzsprout.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you to singer-songwriter and friend of the show, Cole Reisner, for letting us use his music. Remember, Bluffers, we're putting the important details about your healthcare first. Until next time, for everyone that made this one possible, I'm Jesus Flores.